My name is Madison Clark. I grew up in a big house in Ohio where the silence was often louder than the conversation. In my family, my sister, Olivia, was the sun. My parents and everyone else were just planets orbiting her. I wasn't even a moon. I was just empty space, the background that made her shine brighter. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. For years, I thought if I was just quieter, kinder, and asked for less, they might one day see me. But the night they called me useless in front of a room full of people, that was the night I finally understood. They would never see me, and it was the night everything changed. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. It was Olivia's 28th birthday, and like every event in her life, it was a production. My parents had rented out a lavish ballroom in a historic building in one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden light over dozens of guests in cocktail dresses and smart suits. A string quartet played softly in the corner, but their music was mostly lost under the hum of laughter and cheerful chatter. I stood near a towering floral arrangement, holding a small glass of sparkling water, trying to look like I belonged. I didn't. I felt like a ghost at the feast, watching my family from a distance. My father, a man whose approval I'd chased my whole life, was holding court by the bar, telling a loud, booming story about one of Olivia's childhood tennis trophies. My mother, elegant and poised, floated through the room, her hand brushing Olivia's back protectively, her eyes shining with a pride she never directed at me. And then there was Olivia. She was in the center of it all, of course. She wore a shimmering silver dress that probably cost more than my car. Her laugh was bright and confident, and people were drawn to it like moths to a flame. She was telling everyone who would listen about the success of her new boutique interior design firm, a venture my parents had funded without a second thought. I knew I had to give her my gift. It was a tradition, a performance I had to go through. My hands felt clammy as I picked up the small, neatly wrapped box from my clutch. It wasn't much, not compared to the mountain of expensive-looking gifts piled on a designated table. Inside was a first-edition copy of a classic novel she'd once mentioned loving as a teenager. I had spent weeks searching for it in online auctions and old bookstores. I thought it was personal. I thought it showed I listened. I took a deep breath and made my way through the crowd. "Happy birthday, Liv," I said softly when I reached her. She turned, her smile tightening slightly when she saw it was me. A few of her friends and our parents looked over, drawn by the interaction. I held out the small box. "This is for you." She took it from me, her fingers barely grazing mine. She didn't even look at it. My father let out a short, dismissive laugh. "What did you get her, Maddie? Another one of your little projects?" My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, honey, you didn't have to." Olivia glanced down at the small, simple gift in her hand and then looked back at me. Her eyes were cold. She held it out for her friends to see, a sneer twisting her perfect lips. "Don't bother," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "She's useless anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. A few guests chuckled awkwardly. Others just looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. My parents just smiled, as if Olivia had told a clever joke. No one defended me, no one said a word. I just stood there, frozen. The sounds of the party faded into a dull roar in my ears. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, filled with pity or amusement. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter or their sister. I was a punchline, a piece of furniture that had inconveniently tried to speak. The warmth of the room felt like ice on my skin. I felt completely, utterly alone. That moment at the party wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the loudest note in a song that had been playing my entire life. My childhood was a collection of quiet memories of being overlooked. I remember the day my parents sat us down in the living room to talk about high school. I was 14, Olivia was 15. They were glowing. They announced that Olivia had been accepted into Northwood Preparatory, the most exclusive and expensive private school in the state. They talked about the opportunities, the connections she would make, the bright future ahead of her. They had already paid the tuition in full. Then they turned to me. "Maddie," my father said, his tone matter-of-fact, "you'll be fine at the public school. It's a good school." There was no discussion, no asking what I wanted. The family's resources, both financial and emotional, were for Olivia. She was the investment. I was just there. While Olivia was going to debate club and weekend trips with her wealthy friends, I got a part-time job at a local diner. I bussed tables and washed dishes, the smell of grease clinging to my clothes. I saved every dollar I earned for college textbooks and a used car. My parents called it building character. I knew what it really was. It was a way for them to not have to think about my needs. Birthdays were the worst. Olivia's were always major events. For her 16th, my parents threw a massive party at a country club with a live band. For her 18th, they bought her a brand new convertible. For my 16th birthday, they forgot. I remember that day so clearly. I woke up excited, thinking maybe this year would be different. I waited all day. I came home from school to an empty house. My parents got home late that evening, exhausted and buzzing. They had been at Olivia's equestrian meet all day. She had won a blue ribbon. My mother saw me sitting in the kitchen, and her face fell for a second. "Oh, Maddie, your birthday! It completely slipped my mind with all the excitement." My father patted me on the shoulder awkwardly. "We'll celebrate this weekend, kiddo." They bought me a cake from the grocery store the next day. It felt like an apology for an overdue library book, not a celebration of my life. I ate my slice in silence, swallowing the lump in my throat along with the cheap frosting. Even our family photos told the story. We'd have them professionally taken every few years. My mother would fuss over Olivia's hair and dress for hours. With me, she'd just give a quick glance and say, "You look fine." In every single photo hanging on our wall, Olivia is in the center, beaming, flanked by my proud parents. And I am always on the edge, slightly angled away, as if I had just wandered into the frame by accident. For years, I told myself it was my fault. Maybe if I were smarter, prettier, funnier, more like Olivia, they would love me the same way. So I tried to be invisible. I got good grades, never caused trouble, never asked for anything. I hoped that my quiet goodness would one day be enough. I hoped that one day they would finally see my worth. I was wrong. Back at the party, after Olivia's cruel words, I stumbled away from the crowd. My body was moving on its own. I felt numb, disconnected from everything around me. I ended up in a small, quiet alcove near the service bar, hiding behind a potted palm. I just needed a moment to breathe, to stop the room from spinning. That's when I heard her voice again. Olivia was standing just a few feet away, her back to me, talking to a circle of her admiring friends. "Honestly," she was bragging, her voice full of false modesty, "the design firm is great, but my real success has been in the market. Dad gave me some starter money from the family company to play with, and I just seem to have a natural knack for it. The investments have just exploded." Her friend gushed, "Wow, Liv, you're a genius. Beauty and brains." I froze. The family company, the investments. She was talking about the inheritance from our grandfather. She was talking about my work. Hearing her so casually lie, so effortlessly taking credit for the one thing that was truly mine, was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. The years of quiet hurt, of swallowed anger, of desperate hope, it all came together and solidified into something hard and clear in my chest. It wasn't hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, quiet certainty. They didn't just forget me. They didn't just ignore me. They took from me without even knowing it, and then they stood in a crowd of people and called me useless. The switch I didn't know I had, the one that controlled my need for their approval, flipped off. And it was never, ever turning back on. The hope that had kept me captive for 28 years died right there, in a quiet corner of my sister's birthday party. In its place, a decision began to form, solid and unshakable. This was the last time. This was the end. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm back over to confront her. What was the point? They had shown me who they were, over and over again. This time I finally believed them. With a strange sense of calm, I placed my untouched glass of water on a passing waiter's tray. I turned and started walking toward the exit. I walked with a steady, even pace, my back straight. I walked past the string quartet, past the laughing clusters of guests, past the table groaning with gifts I now knew were more important than I was. I passed my father, who was still telling stories by the bar. He caught my eye for a brief second, gave a small, uncomprehending nod, and turned back to his audience. He hadn't noticed a thing. My mother was showing someone a picture of Olivia on her phone. She didn't look up. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name. It was as if I had finally become what they'd always treated me as, invisible. The large double doors of the ballroom closed silently behind me. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway, my heels making no sound. I didn't bother getting my coat from the coat check. I just pushed open the heavy glass doors of the building and stepped out into the cold Chicago night. The frigid air was a shock, but it felt good. It felt real. It cleared my head. I walked to my car in the massive parking lot, the silence broken only by the sound of my own steady breathing. There were no tears. The part of me that could cry over them felt like it had been carved out. On the long, dark drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. The silence was my companion. And in that silence, my decision hardened from a thought into a plan. A quiet, simple, and complete plan. They thought I was useless. I was about to show them just how useful I could be, for myself. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a quiet man. He didn't say much, but he saw everything. He was the only one in my family who ever seemed to look at me, really look at me, and see something there. When he passed away 10 years ago, he didn't have much money, but he left his grandchildren his shares in a small, regional manufacturing company he had worked for his entire life. Olivia, of course, got the majority of his shares. My parents had his will structured that way. I was given a modest, almost insignificant portion. I remember the day the lawyer read the will. My parents looked at my share certificate and scoffed. Just some worthless paperwork from that failing company, my father had said, tossing it on a side table. Olivia had complained that Grandpa should have just given her cash. They filed my certificate away in a dusty box in the attic and never thought about it again. But I did. A few weeks later, I retrieved it. I started reading about the company. I went to the library and checked out books on investing and business management. After my shifts at the diner, I would stay up late in my small bedroom, poring over financial reports and market trends. I taught myself everything. The company wasn't failing. It was just undervalued and poorly managed. I started attending shareholder meetings online, never speaking, just listening and learning. I used the small dividends they paid out to buy more shares, 1 or 2 at a time. I used the money I saved from my part-time job. While Olivia was buying designer shoes, I was buying stock. Over the years, my small stake grew. The company, under new management that I had voted for, began to thrive. It expanded, it became profitable. And my modest share, the worthless paperwork, grew with it. It went from a few $1,000s to $50,000, then $100,000, then $1 million. My family never knew. I never told them. It was the one part of my life that was completely mine, untouched by their judgment or indifference. I quietly continued to acquire shares, reinvest, and strategize. By the time of Olivia's 28th birthday party, my useless inheritance had become a 51% controlling stake in the company. It was worth, on paper, just over $19 million. They thought I was powerless. They had no idea that I held the keys to the family kingdom they so proudly lorded over. I woke up the morning after the party feeling a sense of clarity I had never known. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, calm resolve. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat at my small kitchen table. I didn't look at my phone. I knew it would be filled with performative "where were you?" texts. I didn't care. At precisely 9 a.m., I called my lawyer. I had found him a few years prior, a sharp, discreet man who specialized in corporate law. He knew my position in the company, but he didn't know my family story. "Mr. Davis," I said, my voice steady, "it's Madison Clark. I'd like to proceed." "Madison," he replied, all business. "Are you sure? This will be an aggressive move." "I am absolutely sure," I said. "Please initiate the freeze on all joint accounts tied to company funds, effective immediately." Because my parents and Olivia used the company's success to secure their personal lines of credit and fund their lavish lifestyles, much of their liquid wealth was tied up in accounts I now legally controlled. Freezing them was my right as the majority shareholder. "It will be done within the hour," he said. And it was. The first sign that it had worked came around lunchtime. A text from my mother. "Maddie, my card was declined at the grocery store." So embarrassing. "Can you check if something is wrong with our account?" I didn't reply. An hour later, a call from my father. I let it go to voicemail. "Madison, what the hell is going on? The bank just called about a halt on the business loan for Olivia's new storefront. Call me back immediately, this isn't funny." Then came the flood from Olivia, a string of texts. My credit card isn't working. Fix it. Followed by, I'm at a meeting and I can't pay for lunch. This is humiliating. And finally, where are you? Dad is freaking out. Their world of effortless comfort, a world built on a foundation I had secretly managed, was starting to crumble. Their lavish spending had screeched to a halt, and this was only the beginning. Just cutting off their funds wasn't enough. That would lead to a fight, to negotiations, to them trying to manipulate me back into my old role. I wasn't interested in a fight, I was interested in a conclusion. For months, a rival manufacturing firm had been quietly trying to acquire our company. My father had always spoken of their CEO with contempt, mocking him at industry events. Olivia had once laughed in his face at a charity gala. They were everything my family despised: new money, aggressive, and smarter than them. They had made a very generous offer for a controlling stake. I had been holding on to it, unsure of what to do. Now I knew. I called my lawyer again that afternoon. "Mr. Davis," I said, "that offer from Sterling Investors, is it still on the table?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, I believe so. It's a very strong offer, Madison. You know what this would mean." "I do," I said. "It means I'm selling, all of it, my entire $19 million stake." "To them?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Your family's biggest rival?" "Yes," I replied, a small, sad smile on my face. "To them. Please draw up the paperwork. I want it done by the end of the day." The deal was clean, legal, and final. I signed the documents electronically from my laptop. With a few clicks of a mouse, I sold the company that my grandfather had helped build, the company my family saw as their birthright. I didn't just take away their allowance, I sold the entire bank. The next morning, my phone looked like it was having a seizure. It was buzzing and lighting up non-stop on my nightstand. I picked it up and looked at the screen. 14 missed calls from my mother, 23 from my father, dozens from Olivia, and a flood of voicemails. I made myself another pot of coffee, took it out to my small balcony, and decided to listen. The first was my mother, her voice tight with panic, then dissolving into tears. "Madison, how could you? How could you do this to your family? After everything we've done for you, you've destroyed us." "Everything you've done for me," I thought. The irony was bitter. The next was my father, and his voice was pure rage. He wasn't yelling, he was roaring. "You ungrateful little brat! Do you have any idea what you've done? You betrayed your own blood. You sold us out to our enemies. When I get my hands on you—" I deleted it halfway through. Then came Olivia's. It was a long, rambling message, a mix of high-pitched screaming, sobbing, and venomous insults. "You worthless little snake! You were always jealous of me. You ruined my life. My firm, everything. You have nothing. You are nothing." For the first time in my life, their words had no power. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I just listened to the raw, unfiltered sound of their consequences. They weren't angry that I was hurt. They were angry that I had taken away their toys. They were angry that the person they saw as useless had all the power. I sat there on my balcony, sipping my coffee as the sun came up, and listened to the storm I had created. And when the last voicemail was done, I deleted them all, one by one. Then, I blocked their numbers. I sold my small house in Ohio. I packed up my few belongings, my books, my clothes, my grandfather's old photograph. I didn't leave a forwarding address. With a fraction of the money from the sale, I bought a small, quiet home on the coast of Maine. It was a simple, weathered cottage with big windows that looked out over the gray, churning Atlantic. The air smelled of salt and pine. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. I didn't buy fancy cars or designer clothes. I lived simply. My peace didn't come from the money. It came from the silence. It came from waking up in the morning and knowing that my day belonged to me, and only me. There were no expectations to manage, no passive-aggressive comments to endure, no desperate need for a crumb of affection. There was just the sound of the waves on the shore. I poured my energy, and a significant portion of my money, into starting a small foundation. It provides grants and support for women who have been silenced, dismissed, or emotionally abused by their families, women who are made to feel useless. Helping them find their footing, their voice, and their independence gave me a purpose I had never imagined. It turned my pain into something constructive. My freedom wasn't about revenge, it was about release. It was about finally closing a door on a room where I was never truly welcome and walking out into the open air. Sometimes I sit on my porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the tide go out. I think about my family not with anger or hate anymore, but with a kind of distant sadness. They will likely never understand what they did. They will only ever see me as the one who betrayed them. They will never see the quiet girl they broke piece by piece until she had no choice but to rebuild herself into someone they couldn't recognize. Family may call you useless. They may push you to the edge of the photograph and forget your birthday. They may take credit for your secret work and laugh when you offer them a piece of your heart. But their words are a cage only if you let them be. Silence, strength, and action speak louder than their cruelty ever will. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel invisible, know this. Your worth doesn't need their permission. You don't need them to see you. You only need to see yourself. And once you do, you can build a world so full and bright, their shadows can no longer reach you.